All right, guys, hopefully that was a good tour for you all. Now I'm going to leave it to Travis to kind of talk about the history and background of started.
Yeah, so I'll just talk to you guys a little bit about, like he said, the history. I want to also welcome you guys again. So first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about our organization, Samaritan Health. We have 5 hospitals that fill the valley, basically from the Cascades to the coast. We have 2 hospitals on the coast, one here in Corvallis, and then a couple that are a little closer to the Cascades. We also fill from north to south, basically from Salem down to Eugene. So we got the whole Willamette Valley basically from a healthcare standpoint. We don't have a lot of competition. So the other thing I want to talk about was our leadership and for the residency. Dr. Achman, he's the head physician for OSU Athletics. He's also the associate athletic director as well as the medical director for the SAM. So he kind of has a say in all realms, which is really useful for the residency, both from support within Samaritan, but also support over at OSU. So if we need something, we just go straight to him, and he's in charge of both sides of the fence per se. So that's, I think, an important thing to point out. We also have our own Gme department, so we have support from a learning perspective for physicians, PTs, and psychology. So we also have that support. We have our own IRB team, as well as our own statisticians within house. So when residents go through the research process, they have that resource as well. And then Bien pointed to, I was going to talk about why I started a residency. I did my residency at Ohio State, kind of got hooked in the continuation of learning. Then I went to University of Wisconsin because my wife was pursuing a PhD, and they were just starting a residency there, and I got involved as faculty and a mentor there, and again got hooked a little bit more. And then when I came here, there was no residency on site, and I saw a real opportunity to make something special, because what's kind of special about Oregon State that University of Wisconsin and Ohio State didn't have is the connection with athletics from the PT department. So it's really nice, one, from the standpoint of support from Dr. Ackerman and his role, but also the location of our building being, walking distance to all 3 training rooms and all their facilities. But the most important thing is the eagerness of our support, i.e. Dr. Ackerman, on getting us involved in those athletics. So there's a real opportunity. So I pursued that, started a residency kind of blindly by myself, and then the rest of the faculty ended up coming on board, and we've recruited some of the best talent in the country, as you guys can read their bios. The other thing that I think is unique about our facility is, if you looked at the tour, we have physicians on site, we have sports performance on site, so you're never really alone in a silo like some of the other facilities I've been in. So I think that's another beautiful thing about our residency, as well as being in the Pacific Northwest. Just gonna see if there's anything else I want to touch on. Yeah, I think that's about it. But the main reason is just I want to continue to learn and be surrounded by people that want to do the same thing. Yeah, and I'll give it back to you, Vienna.
Thanks, Travis. Caitlin, you want to talk about the curriculum?
Literally more than anything in this world. So I am going to share my screen here, just so I can visually take us through this a little bit. Can someone give me a shout out that people can see that?
Looks good.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to be brief. I just want to highlight a couple components of the residency program as it relates to our expectations, the structure of our curriculum and didactics, the structure, a little bit of our mentoring, and then I'll touch on research a little bit, but because we have essentially all of our faculty on the call here, we can leave some of those specific details probably for Christina as she heads that piece up as well. But if we dive in here, so just to highlight again, as Travis alluded to, we have a really solid team. I think it's one of the strengths of our program, and I think it leads our program to have a really solid curriculum. Again, you guys have access to our bios on our website, but our faculty there on the left, and then looking across the street at, or across the parking lot even, at Oregon State University, looking downstairs within Samaritan Athletic Medicine itself at some of our physicians, at Kyle and our sports performance team downstairs, and then our community partners there. being Lynn Benton Community College and some of our local high schools. We have a really robust team that I think pulls really nicely into the curriculum and the experiences that we try to provide our residents. So carrying that over a little bit into looking at our calendar. Again, this is something you guys have access to on our website, but I wanted to throw it on here just as I kind of touch on some of these things. We try to structure our calendar in as much of a sequential way as we can, hitting some of our bigger body regions that you tend to see in the athletic population earlier, and then get more into some of the sports specific specialty content like your nutrition, sports performance, some of the less common sports specific injuries, pediatric considerations in sports as you get deeper into the didactic content. Throughout, we try and mirror that with some manual labs. That's a newer component of our program this year, just based on feedback that we've gotten from previous residents as a space that they wanted more mentorship and more guidance. We do house a couple sports specialty clinics in the facility here. As you heard mention of in our facilities tour, we do running gait analyses, throwing analyses. We house a concussion clinic with our physicians and PTs here, cycling clinic as well. So those are pieces that we pull into our curriculum. As a resident, you'll participate in labs to at least be able to work your way through either with a mentor or independently if it's something that you would like to become a bit more specialized in throughout your time here. On-field coverage, this truthfully changes pretty much every year in terms of the order and the sequence, but the types of coverage that we involve, I'll dive into a little bit here in a second, but spans Oregon State coverage, local high school coverage, and then Lynn Benton Community College. So while the sports may differ depending on where there's a need, you do have access to coverage experience kind of across that spectrum, which we're pretty proud of. And again, research, kind of again, the sequence there, selection of topic, and then progression through some of our expectations as far as local conference submission, and then a bit more national conference submission with things like CSM. And then practicals we throw on the bottom there just as a way to acknowledge that we do assess you along the way. One of the more formal ways that we do that are some of our practicals. We do mock practicals where you'll get to see our faculty whip out our best acting skills, and we just assess kind of acute injury management that way. You also have an opportunity out at some of your coverage sites to get evaluated by the athletic trainers on site there in actually managing an acute injury or an athlete that comes into the training room post-game or post-practice with some sort of pain or injury. So you're getting feedback along the way there as well. And then a couple other curriculum specific things, kind of how I alluded to, our coverage opportunities really kind of span the spectrum of types of sports you can participate in. So you run all the way from high school athletics through community college, all the way up to Division I athletics. Again, you get training room hours in those experiences, and you get practice and game coverage. This year, of course, has looked a bit different with some of the COVID restrictions, but because of our affiliation specifically with community college and Division I athletics, we've been able to safely integrate our residents into some of those experiences still, which has been huge. It happened a little bit later in our curriculum than normal, but they're still getting those opportunities, and they're knee deep in football coverage right now. So again, something that I think is a really integral part of our curriculum is understanding how to manage athletes in each of those settings, whether it's high school where you're managing parents probably as well, all the way up to Division I athletics where you have, scholarships to consider and things like that. And then curriculum specifically, and this is kind of a big slide, but I want to briefly touch on these pieces and we can dive into more specifics if you guys have questions in our Q&A session. One thing I really want to highlight about our curriculum is our mentoring. we place a high enough value on our mentorship that we intentionally schedule both residents and mentors in their patient schedules to have at least 3 to 4 one-on-one mentoring slots a week. And we rotate through the mentors that you work with every quarter. So Q1 and Q3, you have a group of mentors, and Q2 and Q4, you have a group of mentors. We do that for 2 big reasons. One, it allows us to see growth in you as a resident and kind of carry themes throughout as far as feedback and areas of patient care and clinic care that maybe need a little bit of feedback. And the second thing it allows us to do is it allows you access to every single clinician that we have on faculty, which again is a huge boasting point, I think, of our program, and something that we all really pride ourselves on is the diversity of our faculty, the diversity of experience in our faculty, the diversity of training and interests of our faculty. And so just wanting to highlight that you have access in a one-on-one setting with patients and athletes in front of you to everyone that we have on faculty. Training room hours I won't touch on significantly since we chatted about that a bit already. The educational talks is a big part of our didactic curriculum, so that's where you get a lot of your sport-specific content that one prepares you to be a sports certified clinician practicing in hopefully a sports medicine setting at some point in your future career, and that is kind of our SCS exam prep content, and we structure that 2 ways. We have weekly journal clubs and we have weekly residency conferences. The journal clubs are where we highlight a bit more of our current literature. We do some JOSPT rapid fires once a month. Physicians come in, physician residents come in sometimes, and we'll give journal clubs. Athletic trainers from Oregon State also participate in those, and they will give some of those talks as well. The residency conferences that we do weekly are, again, more of that sports-specific kind of SCS prep content. Both journal clubs and residency conferences are pretty heavily run by our residents. We as faculty and mentors collaborate with you on a lot of those talks, but you get a lot of teaching experience, you get a lot of going to the literature and seeking out current content experience, and formulating kind of, interprofessional and professional presentations and talks. And so that's something that we place a lot of emphasis on. And then patient care, just wanting to highlight, that's obviously a big expectation. We want you to be a really solid clinician so that we can then build strong foundational sports medicine knowledge on top of that. We try to keep your athlete or sport specific population at 40% or greater. Truthfully, it hovers a little closer to that 50%, but can fluctuate seasonally and times of year. And then research is a requirement of our program. Again, like Travis alluded to, we're lucky in that Samaritan has their own IRB process. So coming up with and executing a unique research idea in your 14 months here is actually surprisingly feasible. So that is something that is expected and is something you can kind of take in a lot of different directions. And again, if you guys have specific questions, we can dive into that a bit more in our Q&A. But really, we strive to be excellent here as much as we can, and we are really excited that all of you are here. It shows excellence on your part as far as proactivity and just putting yourself in a position to make the best decision about the future of your career. So that is my education curriculum spiel, and I will hand it back over to you, Vian, if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Hold on. Is it gone?
Yeah, you're good.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Caitlin.
You're welcome.
Jenny, you want to go over your experience?
Sure. So I completed the first year of the residency. At the time, it was a 12-month program, and there was a lot that was crammed into 12 months, so they expanded it to add the extra 2. It gives you a little bit more time. It slows the pace down a little bit too, which I think is just nice and helpful with learning. into the program of kind of like applying for residencies, I had thought about doing a residency. I didn't have a ton of expectations going in because I didn't know anyone who had completed one. So I thought that I would toss my application out there to a couple and see what happens. And then if nothing else, take a year off, practice as a clinician for a little bit, get some of those skills under my belt, and then progress forward with pursuing this in a later date. Luckily enough, kind of just came, the opportunity was given, and so I definitely took it and ran with it. So expectations going in was kind of I was just going to be working a lot, learning a lot, getting to grow my network and expand some of my current patient care knowledge, but then also getting to collaborate with all sorts of professionals in the medical field, athletic trainers, sports med physicians, sports med surgeons, as well as all of the other PTs and PT aides that we work with here. As far as my research project went, I chose to go the case study route, and I picked one of my younger pediatric athletes who tore his ACL and he was returning back to wrestling. There's not a ton of research out there in the combat athlete, especially in the pediatric population. So I chose that avenue and talked a lot about how confidence plays a role in an individual's ability to return to sport, and focused on that. I have submitted my abstract several times to different poster presentations. I'm throwing it out again to the Oregon APTA conference that's coming up in March. So fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens. As far as the sports that I covered while I was here during the residency, I started out with women's soccer, transitioned to Oregon State football. I spent some time out at Crescent Valley High School, which is a local high school here, and then also finished with Oregon State wrestling, which was fitting with my current research project at the time. And then did a little bit of time with Oregon State volleyball there at the end. Since I had hit the majority of all of my hours and all of my things, I kind of got a little bit of opportunity to pick and branch out and see what was available. So when I talked to Travis and I talked to the OSU volleyball athletic trainer, and she was great to have a resident come by and hang out with her for a little bit. So I chose that opportunity. And yeah, I really learned a lot. I think the biggest thing coming out of my residency was the fact that there's so much more to learn. Going in with an open mind is huge and important. Everyone is very helpful, and it's always nice to learn and be around people who just want to grow and learn more. And I think that's something that I truly gained from this experience also, is just constantly wanting to learn, constantly wanting to find out new things, and surrounding myself with people that also want to do that. I'll pass it back to Bien so that we can get going on some questions.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so now we'll open it to the crowd. If anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to do so now, and the appropriate people can answer it. If no one has a question within a few seconds, then I'll start asking. There were a few people who can make it but send in questions, so we'll give priority to you guys first, though.
I guess I have a question for Jenny. What was her best preparation coming in, I think as a new grad, it sounds like, to a resident? How did she self-prepare before for like the field coverage, the athletic training and such, so that she could be somewhat competent before she started?
Well, my undergraduate degree was probably the most helpful. So did get my bachelor's in athletic training and exercise science. So I already had a lot of experience with that acute management. I spent 2 of my 3 years in PT school also working as a certified athletic trainer for the university that I attended. So just having that time, it's all about the repetition. The one thing that we spend here, like at the SAM, when you start your residency, we spend the first 2 weeks doing a quick review, pretty thorough review of emergency management and everything you learned from the EMR course and how it applies to the athletic world. So we spend a lot of time on that in that preparation. But as far being a certified athletic trainer, I think definitely gave me the edge on some of that acute management in the training rooms, at least.
This question is for Christina or anyone else who could speak to it, but what are some of the research areas that other residents have chosen for their project?
Great question. Well, you know, this is our 3rd year, and so like Jenny said, she did a case study. Last year, Travis, myself, and the resident came together to develop a new test on looking at like stability at the hip and the trunk, and to see if that is a way that we can assess athletes not only for their balance but also their stability. And so we did a reliability study for that, and then this year we're doing a reliability study comparing computer movement analysis to human movement analysis and seeing which one is better. Another resident and I are collaborating on a research study looking at closed chain performance in gymnasts, and we'll be doing a reliability and validity study in that realm. So kind of the gamut. I know that there's a lot of other research studies that we're interested in, and we're hoping to, you know, work with our residents in the future to expand on our ideas. And any ideas that you have, I am open to helping you reach and achieve any of your research goals within the scope of doing a residency, because we don't want to put too much on your plate in 1 year.
Three minutes.
I have a quick question. Sorry, my video isn't working. To what extent, if at all, does the resident interface with the sports performance folks? And sorry for the bellowing behind me.
I completely missed that question. Can you repeat that?
How about if I type it? Because I think my connection is really bad.
Take care.
Sounds reasonable. You can type it in the chat.
All right, I'll read out the question. It's to what extent does the resident interface with sports performance folks, if at all?
You want me to answer that?
I could start with that.
Okay.
So yeah, if I get an OSU athlete, usually I'll do my eval. I mean, it'd be the same for high school too, but I just have more experience with OSU right now. But I usually CC their athletic trainer and their performance coach as well, just to keep them in the loop. And then I'm not going to force them to give feedback. It's just if I'm just keeping them in the loop constantly. If they want to give feedback or anything, that's perfectly fine. And then Travis might know of more stuff going on with the Oregon State side, but also Kyle and Kimberly downstairs.
Yeah, just I think from my perspective, there's a lot of communication that happens on a daily basis, whether that's with Kyle downstairs, if it's an OSU athlete and it relates to loading and how much they should be doing in weights or should not be doing certain things, that communication should also be happening. But the answer to the question is there's a lot of communication that happens quite a bit, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and Kyle lectures for residency as well, so you'll get to learn a lot from him. And then I've referred a ton of people to their program, like general weightlifting, and then kind of like a retest later on. They're more than happy to do that and help you out.
This is a question for any of the faculty. If you could change one thing about the program, what would it be?
I want a biodex. Just kidding. I think the question is always like, okay, there's something negative or that I don't like about the program that I want to change, and I think I'm gonna take that question and spin it the thing that I want to keep changing and keep pushing forward about the program. I want to keep pulling in really top level candidates. I want to keep pulling in high level faculty, because I think that the more qualified faculty we have, the more we keep pulling faculty from, you know, different backgrounds, different training, different experiences, the better the program is going to be. So I think that's the way I would like to continue to see our residency program change and kind of push forward.
I have a question for.
Oh, sorry, I was a quick answer there. That piggybacking off of Caitlin, I think when we see something we want to change, I think we have such support that we have an opportunity to change it. Just within this past year, a lot has changed. Not just with COVID restrictions, but an opportunity for us to reach out more to our community and do stuff at local high schools, greater collaboration with OSU and the physicians. So I think when we do see something we want to change, we have an opportunity to change it. So I think it's hard to answer what would I change now, because it's constantly evolving.
I was going to say, I was wondering if you could speak to what the interactions are like in the mentoring sessions, like how structured they are. A little bit about what that's like.
I can take that one. So we've taken a lot of pride in how we've structured our mentorship sessions, and recognize that that's where a great deal of learning occurs, both within a session and after the session. So we've taken time, like Caitlin has talked about, to block a mentor's schedule as well as the resident schedule. So there is we call it a debriefing time. So after you have interacted with your patient, we have a good 15 to 30 minutes just to talk about what happened and if changes need to be made, or your thought process through things. So we have these structured times that happen 3 to 4 times a week with various mentors, but there's also these kind of unstructured times as we're sitting down documenting an opportunity to speak to anybody that's with us. Any physician or case that pops up, you have an opportunity to either email them, or because we're in the SAM together, we have an opportunity just to walk downstairs or across to them. So you have an opportunity to learn and get guidance from other faculty members that are in these kind of impromptu mentorship sessions. And then, as Caitlin pointed out, we do have these didactical practicals that occur, so you get an opportunity to assess your skills directly. So again, it's something we take a lot of pride in. And we tried to do it in multiple ways, both structured and unstructured.
Hey, my name's Cody. I'm a student at AT Still University right now, and I was just wondering if you could talk about any additional continuing education opportunities apart from the general curriculum.
I can take that one. So there's a couple different routes. The residents are given a certain amount of funding per year, $1,500. Are also given money out of GME. That's partly my discretion, partly not, depending on how much money GME is graduate medical education under Samaritan. So what we're trying to do in the future, I shouldn't say try, but what we're going to do is require residents to go to CSN. So that's kind of what we expect to use part of that money for, as well as TCC. And if you don't know what that is, that's the Team Concept Conference in Vegas for the sports section. In the past, we have sent Jenny to the Cleveland Clinic Sports Conference, because they usually allow residents to go for free. So it's just picking up the airfare, and they usually crash with another resident there, either from like Ohio State or University of Wisconsin, if that works out. So those are the 3 of the biggies that we kind of push. And if residents are open to pursuing something else, that's something we can talk about in that time frame.
All right, I think, sorry if I get this name wrong, Diallo Rudolph raised his hands. If you can unmute your mic, you're more than welcome to ask a question.
All right, yes, it's Diallo. that's cool. Hi, everyone. So my question, I'm asking, as an international physical therapist, what are the prospects for someone coming in as an international? Once I've got the US license and so on. And I'm asking from the point of view of immigration, there's the whole visa thing. What are the prospects? Are you guys able to take that on? What are your thoughts?
It cut out part of the question. Vian, did you hear all the question?
Yeah, if I got it right, it sounds like you're asking what support we have in the process of getting U.S. licensure. Is that correct?
Well, not to get the U.S. license, but I mean, if I am licensed, are you guys able to take on an international person as per residency? Because I'm sure there are going to be some immigration requirements. Not every residency is really, I guess, in a position to take on an international resident. So is that something that you guys are able to do once I'm licensed, of course?
Yeah, so I would say we kind of talked about it, me, Travis, and I kind of sent you some notes too, but as long as you meet the basic requirements on the website of being U.S. licensure as well as having it in Oregon, the visa, you'd have to acquire that on your own too, but as long as you meet all the requirements, we're just looking for the right candidate, and you're certainly qualified and welcome to apply.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Before another question's asked, there was a question that from people who could not make it, and it was how many residents we take, and that answer is 2 residents. I'm fairly sure that's the same for next year. Okay, but yeah, anyone else have any questions would be great.
There was a question.
Could I just maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right, there was a question in chat about practical evaluations, so I just wanted to answer that real quickly. So the question was regarding if the practical examinations were done on faculty and staff members or live evaluations, and it's a mixture of both. So we'll do evaluations on, as Kaylin, our amazing actors will kind of act out an injury, but in the partnership with the community and local high school, our athletic trainers are going to assess you in a live acute injury assessment and treatment as well.
Thank you, Sean.
I was just going to piggyback off of that other question about the number of residents, and was curious if you could talk a little bit about how much collaboration the residents have with each other, and what kind of how often their schedules line up as far as event coverage or things like that.
I'll start, and then anyone else can kind of piggyback and jump in if I miss anything. I would argue that the reason that we decided to shift over to 2 is because we wanted to provide our residents the opportunity to collaborate, and so they do a lot of it. I think it's been nice. This is the first year that we've taken 2, so it's been nice to see them kind of use each other as a first line of consult for patients, consult for acute care management, and maybe Vian, you can speak to a little bit more of the coverage collaboration too. But as far as schedules go, they're in clinic generally the same clinic hours. There's a couple of times with COVID right now where, one of them sneaks out for 3 hours in the middle of the day to head out to Lynn Benton Community College, and then comes back and treats back in the clinic at the end of the day, and then the other goes out. So they are forced to collaborate, I would argue, in a lot of different ways there. Sometimes they'll be there at the same time. Sometimes they, hand off patients or athletes, so they collaborate in terms of their communication there. They are expected to do individual research projects, so while they may be able to collaborate in some of the logistical IRB things, that project is expected to be independent. But they, I think, spend quite a good bit of time together, whether it's studying, bouncing ideas off of each other, etc. I don't know if there's anything specific that I missed that any other faculty wanted to comment on as it relates to that question.
I got one thing to add. I think an important piece of that overlap, and you're asking about how much interaction happens. I think one of the most important parts of the residency is towards the end of the residency, at about 12 months in, when we push the senior residents to become more of a mentor, and they actually go through some of the mentor training that the faculty does, and then they serve those 2 months of overlap as a mentor in the clinic, as well as stuff that's not clinical, just when they're talking with them. So there's some expectation that there's a lot of overlap, shifting roles from being a mentee to a mentor. That way, when you leave here, you can use that expertise to effectively teach other people, if that makes sense.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to read off other questions to make sure we answer for those who could make it. One question was, what do you have in your curriculum specifically for adaptive sports? Caitlin might know specifically what they have, but this year we did something called Angel City Sports, run by Katie Lucas in, I think it's Kentucky. I believe it's Kentucky. But she actually ran a virtual coverage event for the adaptive sports Olympics. And they really enjoyed that. They learned a lot about the human body in adaptive sports, and also a way to virtually cover, which who knows with COVID-19 might be like a new thing. But that's one thing they got a few hours of this year. And then Caitlin did do a journal club going over some aspects as well, but she can go further into it. She knows more about the curriculum than I do.
Yeah, so as far as adaptive sports go, as it relates to the requirements of a sports residency program, they require that we touch on it in some capacity. So there's not a ton of guidance as far as hours required and that piece. So we typically structure that in our journal club content. So that kind of leaves it up to residents or faculty to either pull something current if there's new literature that's coming out in that realm of athletics or sport, or if there's an area that a resident is particularly interested as it relates to adaptive athletics. And again, like most kind of subspecialties of sports medicine, as long as a resident you are crushing all of our expectations, if there's an area of athletics that you're more interested in, we are happy to facilitate those types of opportunities. So again, if adaptive athletics is something you're interested in, if running is something you're interested in, and you're passing everything with flying colors, we do have the means to make some of those things happen as a bigger component of your didactic content too.
Thanks, Caitlin. Another question was, would you be able to explain more in depth about OSU sports events and training room coverage? She wanted to know about numbers or hours per week, the environment, and whether it's PTs that just treat post-op rehabs or acute management as well, and also which sports to cover over there. Okay, I guess I'll answer that. Number of hours per week, I'd say, I mean, it's hard because this year's it's COVID-19, so they've been very, very good to us as far as like letting residents and PTs hang out over there. So I'd say right now they're averaging about, probably with total hours of training room and practice and games, it's probably, I'm going to say, anywhere from 8 to 12 hours per week. Definitely collaborative. Dr. Ackerman comes there constantly, and he brings the residents into the radiograph room so they can talk about what they're going over, teach that way. The athletic trainers are awesome in giving patients to. They're usually bogged down with a ton of patients, so they can you can certainly help them out. The athletic training master students are kind of who I work under, and they teach me a ton of stuff as far as like acute management, how to brace or do wound care right before practice. And then I'd say we get both post-op rehabs and acute management. When you're in the training room, of course, it's going to be more acute management, but you will have some Oregon State slots blocked off on your schedule by Travis, and you'll get the post-op athletes over there. Flexibility to choose which sports to cover. I'd say like practice and game coverage would be football. Travis or anyone else, I don't know if you guys do other sports coverage as well.
Yeah, so specifically at OSU, football is the big one because there's so many contact hours that are required by our governing body. So football is the big one. Wrestling is also a big one because it's contact sports, and soccer. So those are always going to be primary ones that we aim to get. There is some flexibility from the standpoint of OSU athletics is in need, say an athletic trainer leaves, gets sick, whatever the case is, we help to try to fill that void by pushing our staff in a certain direction if they need help somewhere else. But the majority of the time is going to be in a contact sport. Yeah.
And I just want to piggyback a little bit on the average hours. The hours about are like those are in-season hours. So those hours fluctuate as athletes go home, as athletes go on break. So there may be components or parts of quarters in your residency program where you're doing no OSU coverage and all high school coverage, and that's maybe 3 or 4 hours a week, or there may be a month or two at a time where everybody's on break, and so that's where we boost up some of your patient care clinical hours. So I'd say on average, it's probably closer to about 4 hours a week if you span it all the way out. Right now is like a really high point with some of the coverage hours that they're doing. So expect fluctuations in those hours throughout the year. You'll have high points with coverage, you'll have low points with coverage, high points with patient care, and low points. And so on average, I just want to make sure that that expectation is there for you guys.
Do you know, I saw your hand raised again. I don't know if that was left from before, but if you have a question, you can certainly ask it. No need to raise your hand. If not, I could just, if this feels terrible, I can lower your hand for you.
Yeah, and we did have a question.
Sorry about that.
What's up, Christina?
One of the questions was how many applicants do we have every year for the residency?
Oh, it's such a fun question. And Travis, you can correct me if these numbers are wrong. I think the first year we had 3. Is that close? Jenny, 1 of 3.
It was 4.
Maybe it was
I think
more
4.
than that. And then I think our second round of applicants was closer to 15, 20.
16.
10, 15. Yeah. And then I think it hovered around there. As of right now, applications closed December 1st. I think we're at about 38 or 40. So it grows every year. I think part of that is being a newer program. I think for a while people didn't know we existed. And now we've recruited some really exceptional faculty. So everybody on this call has networks, and those networks have networks. So we've been really grateful to just get exposure that way. We anticipate that it will continue to grow, and we think that is a very exciting thing.
I've got.
And I know we're supposed to stop at 3:45, but I don't have a patient till 4. So, I mean, you can keep asking questions if you'd like, and we can try our best to answer it for you.
I've got one. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I was curious if anybody could speak to the dynamic of what it's like to be on the sideline as a PT and not like a trained athletic trainer. If it's like, if somebody gets hurt, are you rushing on with the athletic trainer that you're working with, and kind of how that works?
I'll start, and then Vian can speak maybe a bit more to the OSU side of things. It depends, I think, a lot on the location of the coverage that you're doing. So in the high school setting, early on, there's a bit more you and the AT run on together because they're doing a bit more teaching and a bit more onboarding, especially if you don't have that specific athletic training background. I would say at this point, we're at 50% of our residents had it, 50% haven't. Again, it's obviously not a requirement. And so that's why we structure high school coverage in there, because the expectation is by kind of the end, so maybe thinking like more of your spring sports, you get the opportunity to kind of try your hand at being the lead in those situations. The AT will always go with you, but you will eventually have the opportunity to take the lead there. Similar situation out at Lynn Benton Community College with any of your sports coverage out there. At Oregon State, typically you are, I don't want to say, it's very unlikely that in a game setting specifically you're going to be head honcho, because they have hired athletic trainers for each of those sports. However, I would argue that in a practice setting in those types of spaces, and Vian, please jump in anytime, they will let you run with it unless they think you're going to hurt somebody. But it's their team and it's their call in that setting. So that's kind of the hierarchy there, at least from my perspective. I don't know, Vian, if you have anything to add from the OSU side.
Yeah, the OSU side. So first of all, I think it's really good that we have high school here, because you do get to be more hands-on. In the Division I setting, I mean, they have a massive staff of athletic trainers. They have master's students, and I think there's like 12 athletic training students. So you'll probably be last on priority to go there, but usually it's just 3 main athletic trainers. Each one has their role. One's in charge of the cart. 2 are like known to they're the ones that are going to run out. Obviously, if there's a catastrophic injury right next to you, you're going to be the first one to respond. But for the most part, it's just crowd control and hydration. On game days, there's a high likelihood, unless things change, that you'll be up in the box doing concussion spotting. But even though it's just concussion spotting, they do call up to you to figure out what frame, play, and what it looked like in slow motion of injuries, and you can radio down and tell them everything like that. But that's why I think having high school is good, though, because you get to take all that, and then you get to be the one that assesses on the field and do all the special tests like right after an injury occurs. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, there's a question in the chat. Can you clarify application due date? It lists as December 7th, but it was mentioned as being December 1st. Thanks.
It is December 7th.
It is December 7th. I was going to correct myself. Thank you.
Yep.
Did everybody just panic, though? I just wanted to make sure everybody handled stress. Throw that out there, see what happened, you know.
Travis panicked. He was like, what? No, I'm kidding.
Travis was like, I did it wrong. I was like, nope, I did it wrong.
I was like, is it the 1st? Yeah.
Is that questions? Is that all the questions people have?
I got one more. Besides high school athletics, is there any other opportunities for like community outreach and education?
Yes, so actually, it's more of an expectation than an opportunity. So every one of our residents has done outreach. Jenny did some outreach with children. So did our last year's resident. But it is a part of our curriculum that we expect to do some sort of outreach, community talk, or to a smaller group, either or. But yeah, that will happen in the residency.
And I just want to jump in and say that the residents next year also have the opportunity to assist in the new DPT program that's opening up here in Lebanon, Oregon, which is next door to us. And so that's just another opportunity to teach and give back to the profession through teaching future DPTs themselves.
Looks like there's a question in the chat by Harrison. It says, if we have experience as a PT working with athletics and getting sports coverage prior to starting residency, do those hours carry on to your SDS? So just by doing a residency, you bypass the hours, so you don't need your 2,000. And then he had a follow-up portion. He was hoping because to kind of move those hours to work on other areas of the residency. Maybe Travis or Caitlin can answer that one.
Yeah, it comes down first to getting as many contact hours that are required, right? So that's why I was speaking to like football, wrestling, soccer, and maybe someday rugby. But I think as soon as you've checked all the boxes that you need for the residency and for a governing body, then yeah, we can start looking at some other sports. Or if you're doing well and we're not quite there yet and you really want to be in this certain sport, we can definitely work to accommodate that. But our eye is always going to be on the prize of achieving what you need to achieve to pass the SDS exam and be successful in treating an athlete safely on the field. And then if you're doing all those things, then pursuing other things will definitely be supported.
There is another question about involvement with less traditional sports such as climbing, hiking, and paddlers. My first thought with that was whether you want to or not, you will definitely see those in the Pacific Northwest, just in the natural community patients. But if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree, and kind of to echo the point that Travis just made, if you're hitting all your marks and there's a specific area or community outreach or group that you know of in the community that you would like to get more involved in with a non-traditional type sport, again, that's something we will always support you in as long as you're checking the boxes of the program.
Anything else? I feel like I've asked the other questions that people submitted already. Oh, there's one. Where are some of the past residents now located, and what type of jobs and settings are they currently working in?
Well, Jenny, example A, still here working on faculty, collaborates with Division I athletics, residency involved, she's just a lot of gold stars. So obviously we kept her. We said she can't go work anywhere else. She has to stay. And then our second graduating resident, he had family up in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. So he's up there working at a sports medicine orthopedic clinic that collaborates with a sports performance center as well. And he has been tasked as a staff PT up there to head their high school outreach program. So he's still involved in sports coverage in that way. And then I believe their sports performance program there has contracts with a couple pro teams. So they, like a couple times a year, will do some performance testing on the guys and gals that come through there too. So that's where he is. And then Heather and Zach will find out.
Yeah, and Kevin in Salt Lake City is also being tasked with hopefully starting a residency there within the next year. So that's also what he's up to.
Bless him.
Any last questions at all? All right, so that concludes the open house. Again, thanks everyone for joining. I know this is the middle of the day since we're on Pacific time, but really appreciate it. Hopefully you're interested and end up applying, and then we get to meet you one day. We'll see how interviews go as we get through COVID situation, but thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.